Hello class and welcome to Experience Design 2. This is the final lecture of the year. It combines two lectures together. Yeah, because the content for either one of them was quite short, so I just decided to combine them both together. Just a quick note that thank you for being in my class. You've all done very well so far. And I'm excited by what how this semester has turned out. Like I said, this is the first time we've done it with the idea of doing some kind of interesting or novel interface rather than just focusing on web and apps. And I think most of you done a great job coming up with creative and novel ideas. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is making a vision tangible. So I think a few weeks ago we talked about thinking about where where technology is going to be like in years and years from now. So I showed you that Corning example of a video that kind of showed these kind of cool interfaces on almost every possible surface you could imagine. Making a vision tangible is sort of like that, but it's more about what's our vision for the next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year kind of goal. So like near future rather than, looking out into the far future. And how do we get there? Let's jump into it. So North Star well, we all know what a North Star is. It's the star in the sky that's always in the middle of the sky at the very top. Industry has kind of taken this term and kind of changed it a little bit to mean something slightly different. The North Star is an industry term for a goal. So it's because people used to navigate using the North Star. So it's a path to follow. It's a guiding light, so to speak. Usually it applies to a long-term goal. For example, where you'd like to be with a product in 5 years' time. Yeah, in my previous lecture, we talked about speculative design. The North Star is the goal of speculative design. But, 5 years is sometimes, a long time out, right? And it's good to have a sense of where you're going to be in 5 years, but you need to also be able to translate that down into where you're going to be tomorrow, right? Like, how do you get to that stage? This may be obvious, but when you go into the sprint with a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish, but you need to go into a sprint with a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish and what success looks like. And you'd be surprised that this sounds sort of like a no-brainer, but quite often in the working world, you'll discover that you don't have a clear idea of what the goal is, or the goal is always changing or constantly moving. This is a real problem for a lot of businesses. In projects that I've worked on personally, there's been issues where the deliverables are not quite clear. And obviously that's not good. If you don't know where the target is, it's impossible to hit it. So hang on. So you need to define clear objectives and deliverables. But make sure that while you're defining the objectives and deliverables, you don't lock that down so tightly that there's no room to kind of add innovation or new thinking and new ideas. So it often doesn't pay to nail down the requirements of a project too tightly. If you do, you will limit the ability to come up with something creative and groundbreaking. Be clear about what the goals of the project are, but leave room to experiment on how to achieve those goals. When you've done that, it's helpful to put it together in a story. So we've done user flows in this class and user journeys. There's a thing called user stories as well, which is more like a written narrative rather than a visual document. And you basically kind of put it together like a story. So you talk through how the person uses your technology in a very kind of practical, easy to understand way. I use this quite often with my own clients day to day, actually, when I'm trying to describe exactly what we're going to produce for them. Sometimes if I wrote it up in like very technical, detailed language, first of all, it might take pages and pages for me to capture the whole thing. The second thing is that sometimes it's missing the spirit. Doesn't always capture the spirit of what you're trying to, what you're intending to do. So writing it out like this often is much better at kind of capturing the spirit. I think I have an example here. Yeah, so while on Facebook, Josephine sees a petition protesting the removal of recess at her kid's school. Josephine reads the petition and decides to sign it. Josephine is asked to share or give money. She decides to skip. Josephine is asked to contact the decision maker. She decides to send an email. So you can see what this is. We've identified a person, given them a name, and kind of talked about how they're using the technology. For this in particular, it's an online petition. I think it's that petition software that people always use. Anyway, I know I've used it in the past. Maybe younger people like yourselves don't petition that much. I don't know. I'm old and cantankerous, so I signed all kinds of petitions. Doesn't seem to change anything, but anyway, I digress. So you can see that this kind of clearly captures the spirit of how the user is using the technology without getting into the real technical nuts and bolts of what the interface design looks like. And like I said, this is great because it gives you room for it clearly lays out what needs to be accomplished, but doesn't describe down to the last detail how that's going to be accomplished, right? So, Josephine is asked to contact the decision maker. She decides to send an email. There's like a lot wrapped up in that. Like obviously she's on a page where she's asked if she wants to contact the decision maker. And it seems from here there's more than one way to contact that person. But a client can read this and can completely understand what's going on. So creating a story or a narrative, like we talked about in the narrative lecture I did, is very, very helpful to kind of basically understand what you're pitching. It's easier for the client to understand what you're pitching. And it provides enough direction without getting too bogged down in the details to give you enough of a basis to move forward creating like a UX document, wireframes, or whatever you're preparing. The best way to get useful feedback is to make a prototype. Now, you guys already know this because we did a prototype last semester, and you're going to be doing another one now. And you can see that by building a prototype, it makes it real for your client and for the end users. They can move through it and click buttons and see how it actually works. And when they can do that, you actually get real feedback on how your experience design is working, right? Whether your wireframes are performing the way you expect them to. Because when you kind of go away and work on this in isolation, you sometimes make assumptions about how people will use your interface, and sometimes these assumptions are proven to be wrong. And showing them flat graphics doesn't always capture all the details about how it works. It's very easy to look at a design and go, oh yeah, that works. But then when you actually start using it, you realize that, oh, no, this is kind of clunky, or wait, people don't know they have to hit the more button, etc., etc. So yeah, creating a prototype is the best way to kind of validate quickly that your approach is working, and gives you the ability to test it and present it to client. So when you're presenting, when you've set out a vision and told a narrative about a user using it and created prototypes, and now it's time to kind of present it back to client or key decision makers. It's always good to make your presentation fun and interactive. I've asked you guys, for this semester and last semester to create presentations for all your work. And like I've said in the past, I think it's good for you to develop these skills, because essentially in the business world, almost everything is communicated through presentation decks. A little too much, I would say. I've seen budgets and timelines presented in decks, and it's not really the best format. But good or bad, it's become sort of the lingua franca of the business world. But I've often stressed too that experience design is not just the stuff that you're working on. It's also the experience that you have presenting it with the client. You have to design the experience of actually getting your client on board with the choices that you've made. And one way to do that is to make your presentation fun and interactive. Um, you know, just showing kind of flat graphics for 30 minutes, it's going to be dry and it's going to be hard to keep people's attention. So, one way it would be to actually show a clickable prototype. If it's an app, actually put it on a phone and put it in front of them. You could do a short video that shows people using it, etc., etc. There's lots of ways to kind of add a little bit of visual interest into your presentations. And finally, get user feedback. So, when you're done, you're not really done. When you're done, that's when you have to show people your prototype, get real constructive feedback, and go through an iterative process where you refine and define and make your experience design even better. So now we're going to go on to the second half of the lecture, and it's about why do we prototype? And this may feel like we're beating a dead horse, because I think I have you guys all on side about whether a prototype is the value of a prototype. But let's just go through this quickly, just to kind of hit that one home. So making it real. Like I've already said in this lecture and in many other lectures, I've used this term before, making it real. In my professional experience, I've discovered that clients will often not pay enough attention to anything you put in front of them until it actually looks like a final design. I could speculate on why. I think it takes a certain amount of work to understand like basic wireframes. I think it takes work to understand user flows and things like that. And clients kind of look at it and look over it quickly and go, yeah, that looks fine. They don't really give it the level of attention that really needs to be done. So, information architecture, experience design used to have a very kind of methodical process where you would start, where you would create like an information architecture. You'd lay out what the site looks like from a structural kind of point of view, do user flows, things like that, then move on to low fidelity wireframes, and then based on feedback and kind of discussion and stuff like that, you move to high def or final designs. The problem with that process, though it makes logical sense, is what ends up happening is you get some feedback on all these beginning processes, and you think that you've got the feedback that you need to kind of create the high def wires. But what ends up happening is, as soon as you show the client the high def wires, you get a whole bunch more comments that should have really come earlier in the process, but don't. And this is obviously frustrating because you're going through this methodical process for a reason in order to kind of get these comments out in the low def wire, because the whole purpose of doing low definition wireframes is they're easier to produce. So that's the kind of point where you want to be iterating. You don't want to be iterating once you get to final design, because it's a lot more time consuming. But then you plop a final design or a final prototype in front of a client, and all of a sudden you have 100 comments that you didn't previously have. And it's because for them it's suddenly real. They realize that this is what it's going to look like and how it's going to function, and suddenly all their attention is on it. Work a problem. Sometimes you have a design challenge without a solution. As a skill, prototyping is a great way to visualize the problem and introduce solutions quickly. If it doesn't work out, throw out the prototype and try again. So what this means is that if you had to in the olden days, if we wanted a prototype, we had to actually develop it, right? We'd usually take shortcuts in how we built it, so it wasn't too time consuming. But it was still time consuming to do that. Now with these new tools like XD and Figma and other things, Sketch, it's very easy to create a clickable prototype very, very quickly. So because we have that, it gives us the ability to kind of iterate in the prototype stage quickly to try things out and see if it works, see if it doesn't work, you know? So it allows you to kind of like approach a design challenge very quickly and efficiently, and then come out with a solution very, very quickly. Whereas if you send it into development and get that feedback, it would be a very long, drawn out process. And I know that because that happens as well. Iterate. Prototyping comes in stages, but the result's the same. To evolve your ideas, from sketches to hi-fis, each new iteration offers a plethora of behaviors and functions to test. And with more data, we can iterate both faster and smarter. Detect unintended scenarios. Once something is visible, we have the limitations of our product available for study, which also provides a better context on what should be there and what shouldn't. Yeah, so like I said, you might have intended the flow of screens to work one way, but then when you are prototyping it and people are using it, you realize that you forgot to put a dialog box in there to do OK and cancel. Things like that often get overlooked, and so, or people may try to use the interface in a way that you didn't intend and created like a use case that you hadn't anticipated. These are all things that kind of prototyping shines a light on. Detect usability problems. So yeah, obviously, if people are trying to use it and they can't figure it out, you can see where the issue is actually happening. You can go to the user that's trying it, like why didn't you click the X to close that window? And they might say, well, I didn't realize the X did that. I thought it might close the whole application. And that information is good to know, because if it's happening to that one particular user, it's probably happening to other ones. And as I said earlier presentation, prototypes are great for client presentations. It looks finished, looks like it's working, they're paying attention to it, they're invested in it, you're getting good feedback, you can iterate and kind of modify it until it's perfect, and then you send it to the developers, and the developers love it because they can refer to the prototype to see how it's working. All right, and that's it for our short lecture this week. This is the last one, so good luck on your final projects, and maybe I'll see you around the hallways next semester or next year if we go back to school. Thank you for taking my class. It's been a pleasure teaching you.